Warriors Orochi 2 was released in the United States on September 23rd, way back in 2008. Naturally, Japan got it much earlier in April of the same year. Now, while the game does also exist on the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation Portable, all of my experiences with the game were had on the Xbox 360 version. Developed by Megaforce and published by KOEI, Warriors Orochi 2 currently has a Metacritic score of 44. Technically speaking, the Warriors Orochi series is known as Musuo Orochi in Japan. Therefore, the Western Warriors Orochi 2 is essentially Musuo Orochi Rebirth of the Demon Lord, kind of like a Warriors Orochi 1.5. Moving forward, our Warriors Orochi 3 is the Japanese Musuo Orochi 2, just to make things confusing. A Megaforce, who develops most, if not all, Warriors games, are undeniably best known for their work on the Dynasty Warriors series, and you can probably guess that this is very similar. From my experience with friends and acquaintances, most United States players tried Dynasty Warriors 3 and to a greater extent the all-popular Dynasty Warriors 4. To continue the trend of naming things in a confusing manner, the United States Dynasty Warriors 4 is the Japanese Dynasty Warriors 3. This occurred when Sengoku Musuo was released in the United States and Europe as Dynasty Warriors, which was a 3D fighting game similar to Tekken. With Dynasty Warriors 2 being a completely different hack-and-slash title, Japan decided to name the series Shin Sengoku Musuo, forever creating a confusing gap for the rest of the world. Now, I don't want to over-explain Dynasty Warriors, but it's almost essential when trying to bring up Warriors Orochi at all. Dynasty Warriors games are known for their large character rosters, and Warriors Orochi gets about half of its characters from that series. The other half comes from Samurai Warriors. Dynasty Warriors games get their characters from the classic Romance of the Three Kingdoms stories, while Samurai Warriors takes from feudal Japan. Simply put, Dynasty Warriors is to Cao Cao as Samurai Warriors is to Nobunaga. Gameplay-wise, though, they're all highly similar, but not completely the same, as critics tend to suggest. Now that I think we're fairly caught up, I can actually talk about Warriors Orochi 2. It might seem odd that I decided to go with the sequel title rather than the first game, but I have two reasons for doing so. First of all, this is the largely better game. Warriors Orochi 1 was highly simplistic despite coming out only a year prior, almost like a jimmy-rigged Frankenstein's monster of a game. Both games ran on the same engine, but the first game failed to try enough new ideas. The combat engine was largely unchanged from the Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors games, and it was all just very basic and surprisingly boring. To me, Warriors Orochi 2 is where Megaforce finally started to get it. Not in terms of graphics, mind you, and even the core combat needs a bit of work to get where we are today in 2014, but when speaking of the metagame elements, it really stands out. But I'll get to that more in detail later. The second reason I chose this game was, well, I'm playing it. It takes about 100 hours to complete, and it's certainly been on my mind lately. Alright, now that we're finally on a similar page, I can actually discuss the game itself. First of all, the character selection or roster. There are 92 fully playable characters to play as and unlock, up from 79 in the first game. These characters are divided into several different factions, namely Wu, Wei, and Shu, which were the primary armies from Dynasty Warriors, a Samurai faction, and the new Orochi faction. Progressing through any of these 5 campaigns unlocks new characters as you progress, and these factions themselves are composed of characters from the 5 campaigns. Meaning, selecting Wu does not limit yourself to only characters of the original Wu faction. Rather, you are playing throughout the story with their leaders and recruiting new characters along the way. This is interesting as you'll create teams of characters who could be mortal enemies in the other games, but in this scenario have to work together. Because of this, there is a large barrier to newcomers. While the sole concept of nearly 100 characters in a hack-and-slash title is hopefully intriguing, there's a lot of knowledge you're expected to have to get the full experience out of the game. Personally, I'd only played a handful of Megaforce titles prior to finishing Warriors Orochi 2's story, and this only built up my interest in the surrounding games, so it really just depends on the gamer. While I'm mentioning the story, it's really the character interactions and dialogue that mean the most to me. The story is static, and there's only one way to progress through the game's levels and campaigns, but choosing specific teams of characters results in unique dialogue at times during a fight. I like that sort of thing, even if it is cheesy and hammy most of the time. In terms of the literal story, Warriors Orochi 2 is about the merging of worlds between Samurai and Dynasty Warriors, due to a demon king named Orochi attempting to destroy the world. Essentially. It's simple, but it works, and if the only good thing that came out of this title was the creation of Orochi, then it's all worth it. Seriously, look at the snake eye. That scythe is fantastic, and his stance while holding the thing is unforgettable. I mean, it's on the box art. You can tell they were proud of themselves. To me, Megaforce are masters at character design. Sure, a lot of their stuff was inspired based on the Romance of the Three Kingdoms artwork, but they still create primarily original stuff. It's masterful, really, even if oftentimes silly. Whereas unlocking concept art in a game is usually boring or uninteresting, these games give you character artwork that you want to look at. Maybe that's just me, but I really find that even as the game evolves, the older artwork and character designs are simply timeless. Back on track, it should be pretty clear by the gameplay at this point that Warriors Orochi 2 involves the killing of hundreds of enemies over and over again. To many, that is all these series have ever offered. But it's a lot more than that. There are several meta elements at work. For one, the progression of character strength in order to feed the idea of the power fantasy in gaming. This is gameplay of a new game with low-level characters. Note how slow it is, how long it takes to kill regular troops, even on a lower difficulty.
Here is where you wither and die.
Now this is gameplay with endgame content. Max level characters, highly buffed weapons, and on the game's hardest Chaos difficulty mode.
I will quickly dispose of these insects for you. Entropy will always triumph.
If you are capable of such feats, then our army shall surely win.
I have heard great things about you.
The time it takes to get from one side to the other depends on the player, but the point is that it happens. The developers encourage you to grind, and have been doing so for years. Typically, the first 2 to 3 levels of any given campaign are a breeze, then they challenge you. This admittance of defeat challenges you to revisit earlier stages in order to become stronger. And upon revisiting a level, you have already become drastically stronger, so it doesn't take as long to do this time around. Meanwhile, you unlock free experience to use on any character you want, thus removing the past issue of forcing yourself to play as every single character just to get them stronger. Now, if you're a veteran and are waiting to unlock a character you prefer, you can immediately level him up to make him viable, or you can just dump it all into one extremely overpowered character that you like. It's genius, and using just a few simple systems and mechanics, the game encourages replayability through grinding that's actually fun. I oftentimes harp on the Batman Arkham series for its repetitive combat, and yet I adore the Warriors franchise, but with reason. Whereas games like Batman Arkham City force you to alter your combat style based on the enemy, in Warriors titles you can attack however you want whenever you want to. If you're lazy, you can spam the same combo. If you're a bit more into it, you can rotate combos between the 3 characters you can select at a time. It's undeniably simplistic, but that's what makes it addicting. Learning a new character isn't like in a fighting game that requires hours of practice. It's easy to pick up and play a new character, and if you dislike one, you still have 2 others to rely on during individual missions. For masochists, you could theoretically play through the game on harder difficulties with low-level characters, but for me I enjoy the steady pace of unlocking content. Every time you level up a character or proficiency, you are treated to a satisfying visual and sound. It's what I call a content celebration, the almost perpetual flow of new stuff. Whether it be the costumes, the weapons, characters, or even just leveling up through normal means, they throw stuff at you. It's the same feeling you got back in older fighting games from unlocking new characters, only multiplied immensely. Dead or Alive 2 Ultimate, for instance, had a similar element, where characters could unlock up to 20 costumes each. It's a dying principle, largely due to the modern age of downloadable content and microtransactions, but Omega Force merges the idea in newer games. Warriors Orochi 3 has tons of DLC to purchase, but still offers over 100 characters to unlock, each with several costumes and weapons. Anyway, it's addicting. That's really the point I'm trying to stress more than anything. Or at least I think it's addicting, and I'm definitely not the only one who feels this way. But it's more of a Japanese gamer mindset, to be honest. These games don't sell too well over here, and between Raptor and True Achievements, only about 12,000 gamers have played Warriors Orochi 2 on the Xbox 360. Now, it is obvious to me why gamers don't give Warriors Orochi 2 a try. For one, the name is kind of ridiculous, it doesn't really apply to modern English, and sounds a bit awkward when you say it. If a gamer is aware of what Dynasty Warriors is, and understands this is of the same vein, they likely either are already into the franchise, or have had enough. Dynasty Warriors 7 is by far the better entry point to attract new fans, but recommending only that belittles everything before it. Yes, Warriors Orochi 3 is the better game, and don't even get me started on Dynasty Warriors Gundam 3. But each and every Omega Force title has unique nuances that are worth exploring. And Warriors Orochi 2 is like $10 at GameStop, so it's not exactly a huge asking price. Admittedly, I'm fully aware of my own bias towards this game in the series, but at the very least, does it at least sound interesting from the viewpoint of someone who likes this kind of thing? Rather than the, oh, you just kill weak people over and over again comments I've heard way too many times. Sure, you do mash on buttons, but it's much more than that. Yes, the graphics are dated, but when has that ever been more important than the gameplay? Maybe you've already played Dynasty Warriors 4, but does that really guarantee you won't enjoy the newer releases? Now, well, that's all I've got for today, so thanks for watching. Please comment and consider liking or subscribing. Thanks.